welcome everyone. I'm Gunther Berman. With my wife Maggie, we're the founders of the Newport Car Museum. We're in our 5th year. We opened in June of 2017 with about 50 cars. There's about 90 cars here now. It makes me smile to come into this gallery of all the 7 galleries that we have, because the first sort of, everyone asks me, when did you start collecting cars? Well, I've been a car enthusiast from the time I was like 5 years old. I think in the 4th grade, we had one of those, what do you want to be when you grow up sessions in the 4th grade, and most of the kids said, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or Indian chief, and I wanted to be president of General Motors. I never quite got there, but I guess Ford would have been a better possibility. I don't know, but what really started me on the collection side was my uncle died in the early 70s, and I inherited a '66 Mustang convertible, which was a fabulous car. Unfortunately, it was an automatic, and I fixed it all up and sold it, and bought a convertible D Porsche, and on it went. But I've always been enamored with, especially the high-performance Ford cars, and particularly Carroll Shelby and the things that he was doing from the early 60s on. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the GT350R and the 427 Cobra. Let me start with the 350R. One of either 36 or 37 of those cars that were built. What happened was, obviously the Mustang came out in 64 and a half. The first one I saw was that Caspian blue with white interior, 289 at an amusement park just across the border in Canada from Buffalo, New York, and I thought it was the most beautiful car I'd ever seen. It was just fabulous. Obviously built on a Ford Falcon chassis and not that hot. So Lee Iacocca, who was the president of Ford at the time, called up Carroll Shelby because he was in a hot rod shop in Southern California, and said, you got to make me a race car. And you've probably seen some of the video. Carroll Shelby says, it's a secretary's car, it's a brick, how can I make it into a race car? And Iacocca says, well, you work for me, do it. So he got a bunch of cars coming from San Jose, the Ford factory there, took the hood off, took the engines out, detailed the engines, put all kinds of took everything out of the car, and put, including the windows, they're plastic windows. If you look at the car, it's plastic to really, really lighten up the car. So it was just a bare bones car with a plastic hood and a plastic windows and no back seat, and out of the Ford bin parts that turned it into a race car. The whole idea of the car was the Corvettes were winning SCCA, and the Fords were dogs in comparison to the Corvettes. And Shelby was a pretty competitive guy, and he put that car together, and all of a sudden, boom, the first time out of the box, it started beating the Corvettes pretty handily. The prototype, which was driven by Ken Miles ultimately, from the Ford Ferrari thing, the guy that drove the GT40 and had to slow down to make the 3-car finish, would have actually won, but started 20 feet or something, 20 meters further down the track, so finished second. But anyway, the first one out of the box, they call it the Flying Mustang, and it won its first race and just kept winning after that. Very, very special car. Not many of them were built. You know, for you guys that watch the auctions, the prototype that won the first race just sold for a little over $4 million. It was crazy. Because after the race, I think some guy in Peru bought it, and they brought it back and did all the work on it. The story goes that the slit in the back window of the car, you'll see that there's a slit that, so it's open, and that's because the cars were going so fast they blew the back window out, I think. So they. It's a very, very unique car. As I say, only 37 of them exist, and one of them is here in our museum. In 2015, they did a 50th anniversary of this car, and they only did 37 of the GT350Rs, and the one in the back of the line there, behind the 350 GT convertible, is a GT350R, and it is the one of 37 that was built in 2015, and it is the same build number as this car. So it's actually the grandson of this car, which is kind of neat to have. And we didn't know when we bought it that was the case, but it was a interesting purchase. So these cars were doing really, really well, and I think 3 years after the Mustang was introduced, they sold 1 million Mustangs. Amazing. So they hit the youth market and what was going on at that time. And you know, I think the most Googled car now on all the car sites are Mustangs. And I guess in a tribute to Shelby, I mean, this whole exhibit, there are more Shelbys than anything else, and obviously it's something near and dear to my heart, and especially the big power cars. And probably the epitome of the big power cars is the 427 Mustang. As you probably know, Shelby was raced. You know, he started as a truck driver and a chicken farmer, and didn't succeed very well. His first, he made a little money on his first flock of chickens, and then the second one, something happened, and he went bankrupt. And during that time, he was also a bit of an amateur racer, racing MGs, and eventually caught the attention of some of the European car manufacturers. In 1959, he won Le Mans in an Aston Martin. You know, that was a time when the Jaguar Ds were racing, and much faster than the Aston Martins, but like you said, they had better brakes, and he won. Well, anyway, he had to quit racing right after that in the early 60s because he had serious angina, and when he raced, he had nitroglycerin tablets under his tongue to make sure that he didn't have a heart attack while he was racing. And so he quit in the early 60s and decided he wanted to become a car manufacturer. And he was a bit of a entrepreneur, I guess is the best way to say it. When he was in Europe, he saw AC was making a very, very nice car, and they'd lost their license to put Bristol engines in the AC, and he convinced AC to send him a couple of bodies and chassis, and then he went to Ford and convinced them. They had a new 221 cubic inch engine that became a 260 by the time he convinced him to give him the engines, and made it an American V8 into that sort of small AC car, and created the 289 Cobra, which was an absolute killer on the track. It just beat everything that was going at that time, and handled well. And again, his object was to beat the Corvettes, and they did that pretty handily until 1964 or so. And then he heard that Chevy was going to put a big block in their '63 Corvette, and you see we have a Grand Sport out there. It's not a real one. There are only 6 of them, and sure enough, he went to Bahama Race Week, and the Grand Sport Corvettes just killed the 289 Cobras, and so he had to do something again, because he was a very competitive guy, and got together with Ford, and they decided to modify the 289 Cobra and drop the new Ford 27 engine, which was a NASCAR version of their side oiler into the 427. Well, it didn't fit, so they had to widen the car, and Ken Miles, again, the guy that was involved in the GT350 program, was a heck of an engineer, and David McDonald was also involved with the hot rod shop that Shelby had at the time. So they widened the back of the car. They extended the fenders. They obviously took the bumpers off, and those are jacks for lifting the car. Put much bigger wheels on the back, and again, the legend keeps going. He was very, very competitive with that particular car. It's probably the most replicated sports car that we know. We have that Kirkham Cobra over there, which was one of the. I've always been enamored with those cars that was built by a bunch of guys that had a real one and digitized it, sent it over to Poland, and had the body built in a MiG factory in Poland that was it was no longer building MiGs, and had a lot of people who could bang aluminum, etc. And they did a beautiful job with that car, and in fact, sort of the modern version of a 427 SC Cobra has a Keith Craft engine, and it looks exactly like the one in the real one, 427, except it's aluminum block, and it's dynoed at 661 horsepower. You know, for both cars, they're about 2,100 pounds. You know, this one is somewhere between 425 and 450 horsepower in a 2,100 pound car. That's crazy. You know, it held a record for probably 20 years as the fastest car from 0 to 100 back. 13 seconds was a phenomenal car. They continued to race them for a long time, and this one, we bought these two in a package. That's what I'm kind of talking about, both of them, because they're very, very special cars. They had a friend of mine that owns Legendary Motors had both of them at the time, and it seemed like a good combination to buy both of them. This car used to be painted bright yellow and was owned reputedly by Rob Walton from the Walton family, and he raced it for a while, and obviously it's been restored now. We have a couple of pieces off the car that are you can see the bright yellow. I like it better in blue. I hope you all think it's better. It's better in blue. And the real story behind that is that Shelby wanted to create this super race car, and in 1965, and you had to build 100 of them to have them homologated for FIA, and which was the racing body at the time. And so he, in his usual way, like when he did the first 289, he had the prototype, and he used to just paint it a different color all the time to make people think he had a lot of production. Well, anyway, when he was building these cars, he only built 53, and the FIA inspectors came, and so he was out in terms of racing the car FIA. So of the 53, I think he sold 31 to privateers to race, and there were whatever the number was, 33 left. Ford took 3, and the rest of them were just sitting there. Pretty expensive in their day, so one of the Shelby dealers in New York came out and said, "What are you going to do with the cars?" And he said, "We don't know. We can't sell them as race cars. We don't know what to do." And he said, "Put a windshield on them, and we'll sell them as SC street cars." So that's a full competition car that just has a bigger windshield, and they were still pretty slow sellers, but now they're iconic, obviously. So special cars, both of them. We'd love to have them in the Newport Car Museum. Obviously, they're a big attraction because we think they're very, very important cars, and that's why we have it on the turntable. So I hope that gives you a little bit of background on these two cars. The rest of them here are again very Shelby related. The Series 1 over there is the only car Shelby designed himself. It's a terrible car. I've driven it. It's awful. But it has an Oldsmobile engine. He was, again, a bit of a huckster, got Oldsmobile to give him engines and things, and built 250 of them and went bankrupt. He went bankrupt a couple of times with things. So, but he was also involved in, we have a GT40 over there. It was the car that was actually in Fast and Furious, the Fast 5, where, I don't know if you've seen that movie, but there's a bunch of people going to steal some cars off a train. They come up next to the train, take a acetylene torch, and open the side of the train and pull a flatbed next to it, and that car is driven off by one of the stars of the show. But it's a really good replica of a GT40. Again, and Ford tried to win Le Mans with a GT40 and sort of failed for their first attempt, and then went to Shelby. If you've seen the movie, Shelbyized the GT40, and they won Le Mans for 3 years in a row. Pretty dramatic change in what was going on. So in any event, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about either of the two cars or anything in this particular gallery, which, again, when I walk here, kind of makes me smile because of the history that I've had with the cars. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so happy that you're here. Well, enjoy the museum, and again, tell your friends about it. We enjoy having people promote us if you enjoy the museum. And again, I have a guarantee that if you come to the museum and you don't see a car that you like, we'll give you your money back. Haven't had to do that much.